welcome for all of you tuned in. You're watching TMH's Daily English News. Our headlines for today: AU says Ethiopian government in direct engagements with the Tigrayan forces. GSTS pleaded with the international community to step in to prevent a relapse of the deadly war on the Tigray region. And Ethiopian officials admit using a by-fire-like siege to starve Tigray. AU says Ethiopian government in direct engagements with Tigray forces. The African Union said in a statement made publicly on Thursday, in the first official confirmation of such contacts between the two warring sides. The government has been locked in a grinding conflict with the Tigrayan forces, but in the most recent weeks, both sides have mooted to the possibility of talks to end the 21-month war, with Ethiopia pushing for the AU to lead any negotiations, and the Tigray forces opting for Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has been actively involved in peace efforts to mediate between the two parties. The AU's Horn of Africa envoy, Olusegun Obasanjo, has been leading to diplomatic push to end the conflict, briefing the bloc's Peace and Security Council on his progress. In a statement dated on the 4th of August, but posted on its website on Thursday, the Peace and Security Council said it commends the AU High Representative for the direct engagements between the government of Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The statement is the first public confirmation of direct contact between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and the Tigray government, whose leader, Debretsion Gebremichael, has insisted that key services would have to be reinstated in Tigray before dialogue could begin. Since the war broke out, Ethiopia's northernmost region has suffered food shortages and access to basic services such as electricity, communications, and banking, which have been shut down by the Ethiopian government. As we move on to our next update, 381,000 liters of fuel is needed currently in the Tigray region to reach people in the need of extreme dire food aid and emergency aid, according to the Tigray Emergency Central Operational Fund. As of the 11th of August, food partners require that the amount of fuel to ensure food dispatch and distribution continues without interruption, in addition to the fuel brought through the recent convoy. 6.5 million people currently in Tigray need humanitarian assistance in 2022, and the updated report that 36 humanitarian convoys carrying more than 189,600 metric tons of food entered into Tigray between the 1st of April and the 11th of August, respectively. With more food supplies arriving in Tigray, partners require more cash to cover relevant costs for loading, offloading, dispatch, as well as monitoring. Lack of sufficient cash continues to hamper food response, particularly for local NGOs, and without functional banking services and access to cash still remains restricted, it prevents partners from operating at a scale. According to the emergency update, there is currently food gap for about 1.33 million people within the Tigray region. Ethiopian officials admit using a by-fire-like siege to starve Tigray. According to an article on Ethiopian Insight, events in Tigray are eerily reminiscent of the 1967 to the 1970 Nigerian Civil War, in response to a secessionist war waged by Lieutenant Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu in a predominantly Igbo-populated territory called Biafra. The Nigerian government purposely starved the population, leading to the death of up to 1 million children. As evidence of the similarities in the 2021, and the state-owned Amhara Media Corporation said that Tigray's future is like Biafra, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed boasted that Ethiopian government decides whether aid gets into Tigray or not. Despite a slight improvement in the humanitarian situation since April, these genocidal plans are still ongoing in the Tigray region, and the article noted that much of the Ethiopian public still seems to support these policies or chose to remain silent out of fear and pressure, while the international community has not taken them seriously enough. On the 12th of June 2021, Minister of Foreign Affairs Demak Amokonen declared, without providing any evidence, that humanitarian actors tried to smuggle weapons into the Tigray Defense Force region. Such accusations have been used to block aid from entering TDF-held areas, and 11 days later, in a TV interview, Abiy argued that the Derg government made a mistake during the 1980s famine by allowing aid delivery to Tigray. He was referring to the accusations that the Relief Society of Tigray, the TPLF insurgency's humanitarian wing, diverted some of the aid towards military purposes in the 1980s. After Tigray forces retook control of around 70% of Tigray on the 30th of July back in 2021, the Amhara Media Corporation posted an article calling to turn to Tigray into another Biafra by taking its breath away from all directions. On the 5th of January 2022, Government Communication Services Minister Legasa Tulu stated that if the people in Tigray want their rights to be respected, they should rise up against the TPLF, and in other words, admitted that these rights are deliberately being violated in order to punish Tigrayans for supporting their elected regional government. Finally, as a result, on the 5th of June, Deputy Prime Minister Demaka admitted that the federal government broke aid because it could be used by the TPLF against them. In 2004, Iskender Naga, an Ethiopian journalist, activist, and politician, oversaw the publications of at least 5 columns in his Askwad newspaper that labeled Tigrayans the Jews of Ethiopia and called for Ethiopians to emulate the strategies used by the Nazi Germany. The shocking statement by Abiy's advisor Daniel Kibret, a deacon and preacher in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the Ethiopia needs to exterminate Wayana along with all its supporters, fits with the narrative that was initiated 20 years earlier. Wadajana Maharna, an evangelical pastor and a close confidant of Abiy, also believes that locking up humanitarian access to starve the Tigrayan people into submission is a legitimate way of bringing the war into a conclusion. According to Ethiopia Insight, these pieces, in many ways, read like the script of the massacres, starvations, and detentions that have occurred within the Tigray region since November of 2020. While Iskender and others like him are responsible for propagating such blatantly genocidal rhetoric, the direct culprits carrying out the Tigrayan massacres and implementing the blockade are the government of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Amhara Fano region militia as well. President of the government of Tigray has conferred with the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia. According to Kandeya Gabrehiwet of the Tigray External Affairs Office, Debretsion Gabremikael, during a video conference, briefed the commissioners and chief of investigations about the overall situation in Tigray and raised concerns related to mandate coverage and access and methodology of the commission. Debretsion emphasized that on-site investigations is a must and that the previous so-called joint investigation report didn't agree that the atrocities committed in Tigray and that is not acceptable, as he assured the commission of the full cooperation of the government of Tigray, and the two sides have agreed to continue such engagement as well. Our final update for today, GSTS has pleaded with the international community to step in and prevent a possible relapse to another round of a deadly war on the Tigray region and their people. The Global Society of Scholars and Professionals has released a press statement regarding its concerns about the role of African Union Chief Olusegun Obasanjo in the possible peace talks in the war on Tigray. GSTS said it has believed that the African Union as an institution and Chief Obasanjo could have a role in mediating the complex political crises that are central to the ongoing war on Tigray and restoring peace and stability to Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa at large. It added, however, the AU Commission's handling of what is the deadliest war in the world today serves as a case study on the extent to which institutions can be strong-armed by individual states and dictators to the point of not being able to discharge the mandates that have been conferred to them. According to GSTS statement, Obasanjo has only perpetrated the appeasement of Abiy Ahmed's regime, indifference to the suffering of millions of Tigrayans, and unfortunate disregard for the ongoing violence of human rights and international humanitarian and refugee laws by the federal government of Ethiopia and the allies. Obasanjo's persisting in his recent recommendations to the AU Peace and Security Council and the interview with BBC to frame the negotiations as being between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front shows an inherent bias in the AU-led efforts that is skewed towards adopting the perpetuation of Ethiopian regime's narratives. The people of Tigray are currently represented not by a political party, but by a duly elected government and political leaders. A mediator cannot claim to be impartial or neutral when it seeks to assign or deny legitimacy to negotiating parties or even erase the will of communications and communities that represent them, as they stated in their statement. It's deeply troubling that one of the recommendations forwarded is that the AU Commission's extended a formal invitation to the state of Eritrea to join the ongoing AU-led efforts, as GSTS said. And again, according to the statement, recommendations suggest that AU is seeking to categorize Eritrea as an independent party to the conflict and not a partner acting under the auspices of the Ethiopian regime. Moreover, the general framing of Eritrean involvement in the war on Tigray in terms of intermittent skirmishes resulting from conflict with the TPLF betrays an astonishing disregard for the Tigrayan victims and survivals of brutal atrocities at the hands of the sadistic Eritrean forces. It also willfully ignores the genocidal intent clearly expressed by both regimes, including the Eritrean leader who vowed to cleanse the Tigrayan elite. Similarly, it is shocking that an AU document is uncritically repeating absurd allegations by the Ethiopian regime about elements of the TPLF being in Sudanese territories without any regard to the implications of this for another sovereign state, compromising the safety and security of more than 70,000 Tigrayan refugees within Tigray currently. Although Chief Obasanjo traveled to Ma'ala several times and has had an opportunity to witness the catastrophic humanitarian crisis resulting from this ongoing blockade, his recommendations fail to even address the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe currently in the Tigray region. GSTS stressed that the total disregard for the plight of over 7 million people perishing from a deliberate engineered famine and collapse of the healthcare system exhibited in the latest interview is incredibly distressing. Not only is Chief Obasanjo comfortable with an indefinite peace process without consideration for the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, that can easily perish as a result, but he has also publicly expressed his contentment with delaying the resumption of basic services until after the conclusion of negotiations is held. GSTS stated that it is imperative for the AU Commission to demonstrate solidarity with the victims and also respect for the international law. These factors all add up to the reveal that the groundbreaking and rapid peace process anticipated with the appointment of Chief Obasanjo has completely failed to materialize. GSTS avers that Chief Obasanjo has unfortunately become part of the biggest problem regarding the war on Tigray by giving cover to the regime bent on a genocidal mission to eradicate an entire ethnic minority. It is also particularly troubling that the AU Peace Security Council took up these recommendations in its 1097th meeting recently without weighing the very serious issues reflected in the brief note and their negative implications to the confidence building and negotiated settlement of the political crisis. It demanded that the AU reconsider its decisions by the PSC and appoint another capable nonpartisan envoy and chief mediator acceptable to the main negotiating parties who can take the peace process forward along with the US, EU, as well as the UN. GSTS called on the international community to step in, ensure the other mediators that can be more reliable and impartial by including all of the efforts at the negotiation table. GSTS also pleaded with the AU to avoid a historical failure which undoubtedly will leave a permanent stain on the history of the African Union for generations to come and correct its course to reflect the laudable initiative to silence the guns on the African continent. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.